Lyudmila Pokroshchuk, PhD, expert in foreign and domestic policy, is joining our discussion, our broadcast. Lyudmila, we're glad to see you, and glory to Ukraine.
Hello? Hello. Glory to the heroes.
Lyudmila, what do you personally think? What does your analysis, your analytics personally show regarding what these negotiations in the Kremlin with Kushner and Witkoff might actually and potentially lead to?
They won't end, they will continue with yet another round of negotiations, which will then be interpreted in some way again by Trump. Perhaps there will once again be insistence on some kind of bilateral negotiations between Russia and Ukraine. We've already been through this. But as for what some analysts are saying, that this could somehow move things forward, put an end to, or specifically regarding the Russian-Ukrainian war, bring us closer to a just peace for Ukraine, well, I can say with confidence, no, that's not going to happen. Because you see, we can observe how the Russian Federation is reacting. Literally right before Witkoff's visit, for some reason, Putin is traveling around to his, so to speak, troops, to his military groups, and giving orders about the need to create a buffer zone along the border between Russia and Ukraine, especially where his group, their Sever group, is located. And that's in the Sumy, Kharkiv, and Chernihiv regions. And if we look back just about half a year ago, at the end of May, around the 22nd, if I'm not mistaken, Putin was already making statements to the government, even giving orders about creating a buffer zone between Russia and Ukraine. That was being discussed back then as well. And they said that this was their guarantee of security for the future, so that there would be no attack from Ukraine on Russia for some reason. And what happened after that? Right after that statement, when he first talked about the buffer zone, they sent us, literally on June 2nd, a memorandum about peace. If we all remember, Medinsky brought that memorandum to us in Istanbul, and we all looked at it together with our European partners. That was also quite a surprise for us, just like those 28 points. Basically, if we compare that memorandum and these 28 points that were discussed in Geneva and appeared in the so-called American plan, you'll see that the points are very similar. So, regarding your question, how will it end? It will end the same way. Russia will once again start talking about territories, especially since they know that the issue of territories is a red line for Ukraine. And indeed, as our president has stated, this issue is very difficult to discuss, especially when it comes to the line of territorial control. Where will it run? We know the desire of the Russian Federation, even in these points that were presented, it's about Donetsk, the entire Luhansk region. And as for the rest, they seem to agree along the front line. But they understand that Ukraine will never agree to this. That's why this really is the most difficult issue, the issue of territories. And literally understanding how complicated this issue is, they start talking about a buffer zone as well. So we have to understand that right now, when people like Witkoff and Kushner are coming, obviously they're business people, they don't understand anything about these kinds of diplomatic nuances and subtleties. Especially what the Russian Federation understands. They've, as they say, cut their teeth on this, both Lavrov and Ushakov, on how to outmaneuver especially these kinds of American delegations, because they've spoken with Witkoff more than once. How did it all end? It ended with translation difficulties. That's why they will talk about territories again, and most likely will specifically insert this into the plan, because we have to understand that they won't immediately reject the plan that Witkoff will bring them, showing what has been worked out with the Ukrainian side and with the Europeans. It has already been quite clearly and explicitly stated by Ushakov that they will indeed take this matter and diligently work on it. And perhaps, as President Putin himself thoughtfully mentioned, each individual point will undoubtedly require very lengthy and careful consideration, because these are also their fundamental and crucial security guarantees. And most likely they will also insert this territorial issue there. After all, they are talking about security guarantees. So a security guarantee, one of them will be a buffer zone. After that, Witkoff will come and say, the Russians are talking again, they're talking about a buffer zone, because that's their guarantee. And then we'll go through another round again. So here, basically, just like many senators now, even Republicans, they're saying that a policy of strength should be applied toward the Russian Federation. Because as soon as the American administration shows any sign of leniency, we see that the Russian Federation immediately starts putting forward its demands and dragging things out. And once again, as they say, everything goes back to square one. We're once again entering another round of these unclear negotiations. Where are we in all this? Where exactly? For some reason, Ukraine and our European partners have to justify every point to prove that this is unacceptable, that you can't treat the victim who was attacked by the Russian Federation in this way. And yet every time, the Russian Federation keeps talking about its own guarantees for some reason, What kind of security guarantees can there be for a country that attacked, that violated every possible international rule? It should be held accountable. Yet for some reason, it's the one talking about guarantees. And every time the American delegation goes to hear something from the Russian Federation, how it views this issue of the Russian-Ukrainian war and its resolution. We've been hearing this for literally a year now. I don't even know how many times. And Rubio, the Secretary of State, has said, we want to know what Russia is thinking. And there have been so many of these statements about what it's thinking, I don't even know, probably too many already. Everyone already knows perfectly well what it's thinking. So it's not just what it's thinking, even that, as I said, has already been laid out in documents. There was that first document back in June, the so-called Memorandum on Peace, as they called it then, and now this document with 28 points. Well, no one has any doubt about where it was made, right? Where was it? These points, who inspired them? So I really don't know what the American administration is hoping for, of course, or what kind of progress they are expecting on resolving the Russian-Ukrainian war. As for Russia's side, we are the ones interested in resolving the Russian-Ukrainian war, as are our European partners. It's clear we are working, we constantly propose actions, offer plans, suggest ways to get out of the deadlock that has arisen precisely because of the Russian Federation. But nevertheless, from Russia's side, we always hear the same thing. So the conclusion is clear. Russia will continue to drag things out. Putin will now try to buy time to stall because with the Christmas holidays approaching, knowing that the Americans and Europeans will go on holiday, everything will be delayed until after the new year. And then sometime after the new year, we will start hearing again about some further steps, negotiations, and the settlement of the Russian-Ukrainian war. Witkoff will go there again and discuss something with Putin. So, it's not like this process will just, like Witkoff will go today, talk to Putin, and he'll say, yes, that's it, we're done, we agree to everything you've brought. No, that's not going to happen. We're once again entering a lengthy process, just like it happened more than once after Witkoff met with Putin. Because I have to point out this so-called boat diplomacy of Witkoff, unfortunately, is not the boat diplomacy of Kissinger. In this particular form, it simply does not work effectively, especially when dealing with various countries and their influential heads of state, such as Vladimir Putin. A powerful man who has been firmly in power for a very long time, has successfully outlasted more than just one US president, and understands perfectly well how to skillfully deal with Americans and their diplomatic approaches, and especially with Trump. And we can see how they are following this line and in principle how it's working out for them right now. That's why I say there's nothing new. The only new face there will be Kushner. I actually wanted to clarify with you why him specifically. Trump considers him a specialist in impossible deals, but at the same time, we see CNN pointing out that once again, it's not diplomats who are going, but rather people who are all about money and business. And so the question arises, will Ukraine really be the number one topic, the main thread running through everything, the war of Russia against Ukraine? Or is it more about their own, well, let's say business interests? Even if, let's say, the super Kushner, as President Trump personally sees him, can't achieve anything substantial or bring anything genuinely new back from the Kremlin, is there a realistic chance that finally the senators who explicitly didn't approve this undiplomatic delegation might at last start to put some meaningful pressure, or perhaps suggest, let's appoint a delegation with some real diplomatic or significant political weight, one that Putin simply can't just brush off? How much do you think this could actually bring something new to the negotiation process? What's your view? Well, in principle, yes. Today, well, senators are indeed discussing the issue that if the process keeps dragging on like this, and so to speak, with Kushner and Witkoff, those American negotiators who are now going to Moscow, and nothing new or progressive happens regarding the end of the Russia-Ukraine war, then there is actually talk about creating a certain group. This group would consist of senators, certain diplomats, and there are even discussions that Rubio would specifically head this group so that it would finally start dealing with the issue of the Russia-Ukraine war. Because as they always say, they feel like something is being withheld from them, that something is not being told to them. That's why indeed this is possible, especially considering that after the new year, the election race for the midterms in America begins, and they understand perfectly well that something needs to be done about this issue, or at the very least, they need to show the electorate that the issue is being addressed and that professionals are working on it. Because even the senators themselves say that people in their districts are basically asking them about this issue. What's going on with the Russia-Ukraine war? After all, this was a key issue in the Republicans' campaign during the presidential elections. Therefore, indeed, if absolutely nothing positive happens, no significant shift whatsoever in Russia's current stance, then yes, such a dedicated group will truly and certainly be created by persistent insistence. Well, of course, everything, much, even very much depends on Trump. But I think he will be made aware that if there is no positive progress, then at least some kind of positive activity needs to be demonstrated. Because you can't just keep sending Whitaker. Well, now, of course, you can add Kushner to that, since this all creates the illusion that, as you correctly noted, the issue is not about resolving the Russian-Ukrainian war, but rather, as Russia wants, about a reset in relations with the United States, but specifically on the basis of certain economic deals. That's what, yes, Kushner understands very well, and Whitaker understands very well too. That's why, of course, such an impression is created. And that's why, as I said, this is how the issue is being discussed by this group today. And as for what? Well, what will be discussed? I think that indeed the economic issue will be discussed very actively now, especially by Kushner, because after all, even though he is an advisor to the President of the United States, he is also his relative. But first and foremost, he is not a diplomat, it should be noted. He doesn't understand international relations. He is good, yes, indeed, at deals, just as Witkoff is good at deals, just as Dmitriev is good at deals, yes, on the Russian Federation side. This is exactly what the Russian Federation needs. I think they even advised and insisted on who should come, because literally just the day before yesterday, there was information that maybe Rubio would also go after all. But literally, this information was somehow taken off the agenda in the Russian Federation, who noted, no, after all, it's Kushner who is going and Witkoff. That's why I think they really didn't want Rubio to go there. Because after all, it's easier to talk about familiar topics like the economy, finance, and deals, but not about resolving the Russian-Ukrainian war. In other words, as always, Russia wants to lure the United States into some kind of deals right now to promise something again. But this time, they'll try to secure it through Kushner, who will come and explain in more detail what these deals are about. And this is something that could truly and significantly lead to a comprehensive bilateral reset in their relations, which Russia consistently keeps insisting upon. And this is precisely what President Putin specifically noted during the recent CSTO meeting, stating that after their discussions in Alaska, they had already mutually agreed upon a complete reset of their bilateral relations, but now, unfortunately, it's on a temporary pause once again. That's why they really want to get off this pause and basically to take the Russia-Ukraine issue out of these main bilateral relations, which they are so eager to discuss, their relations specifically with the United States, to come out of isolation again. They want to return to the period like it was after Alaska because that was very comfortable for them. And now, at this very meeting, they will be handing out as many perks as possible. They'll be emphasizing just how great everything will be in these relations, especially how many economic projects there will be in the Arctic. Moreover, it's worth noting that among those 28 points that were proposed, there was a question about the Arctic, right? It wasn't about the Russia-Ukraine war, but there was a question about the Arctic. So hoping that there will now be some kind of breakthrough, specifically in terms of resolving the Russia-Ukraine war, especially a ceasefire, which is what we're talking about now, I don't think it's worth expecting that as a result of this visit. We'll probably hear about translation difficulties again, just like before.
Well, really, Lyudmila, the thing is, after, let's say, the background we've learned regarding the conversations and so on, the question arises, if we're doing the same thing over and over, is it worth expecting any change in Russia's position? Well, I mean, how? To appease even more, but that's not an option. We understand that, in principle, any negotiations aren't about money, guys. It's about the fact that Putin wants everything, right? And he's not willing to settle for any half measures. So Lyudmila will just have to watch, as they say, and with your help, try to figure things out, so to speak, about what prospects there are and what we will end up with, so to speak, or as they say, what will remain when all is said and done. We'll see. Thank you for joining our broadcast. You're always welcome here. Lyudmila Pokroshchuk, PhD, expert in external and internal policies, was with us live. Freedom is now on WhatsApp.
Get the whole truth about Russia's war against Ukraine and be the first to receive the latest news on our channel.
Freedom, only what truly and genuinely matters for us to know and understand.
Subscribe. The link is in the description.